Ohio Democrat takes Trump to court over Kennedy Center renaming, setting off a high-stakes battle over power, law, and legacy. A national arts institution becomes a legal flashpoint. One of the United States' most prominent cultural landmarks has become the focal point of an extraordinary legal confrontation between Congress and the White House. Democratic Representative Joyce Beatty of Ohio has launched a federal lawsuit against President Donald Trump and the governing board of the Kennedy Center, alleging that the recent decision to rename the historic venue violates federal law and undermines the constitutional separation of powers. The lawsuit challenges the legality of transforming the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts into what the administration now calls the Trump Kennedy Center, a move announced abruptly by the White House and implemented with remarkable speed. Within days, signage bearing Trump's name was installed on the building's exterior, igniting outrage among lawmakers, arts advocates, historians, and constitutional scholars. At stake is not only the name of a beloved institution, but also a deeper question about authority. Can a sitting president, directly or indirectly, rename a federally designated national memorial without congressional approval? The Kennedy Center's unique legal and historical status. Unlike many cultural institutions, the Kennedy Center occupies a singular position in American civic life. Established through an act of Congress in the early 1960s and formally dedicated after President John F. Kennedy's assassination, the center was intended to function as the nation's only official living memorial to the 35th president. Rather than honoring Kennedy through a statue or monument, Congress envisioned an institution that would evolve over time, hosting performances, nurturing artistic excellence, and reflecting the cultural vitality of the nation. That intent was codified in federal law, which outlines the center's mission, governance structure, and commemorative purpose. For more than half a century, the Kennedy Center's name has remained unchanged, even as presidential administrations, congressional majorities, and cultural priorities have shifted dramatically. The announcement that changed everything. The controversy erupted when the Trump administration revealed that the Kennedy Center's Board of Trustees had voted to add Trump's name to the institution's official title. White House officials framed the move as a tribute to Trump's role in stabilizing the center's finances and overseeing a series of renovations and operational reforms. According to the administration, the board's decision was unanimous and reflected bipartisan agreement that Trump's contributions merited permanent recognition. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt characterized the renaming as a forward-looking acknowledgement of leadership, claiming the president had rescued the institution from decline. The speed with which the decision was announced and executed stunned critics. Workers were photographed affixing new lettering to the building less than 24 hours after the public announcement, giving the impression that the outcome had been predetermined. Joyce Beatty's lawsuit and core claims. Representative Joyce Beatty, who serves as an ex officio member of the Kennedy Center's board by virtue of her congressional role, filed suit in U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C., arguing that the renaming process was both procedurally flawed and legally invalid. In her complaint, Beatty alleges that she was deliberately prevented from participating meaningfully in the board's deliberations. She claims her microphone was muted during the meeting at which the name change was approved, effectively silencing dissent and undermining the legitimacy of the vote. More broadly, Beatty contends that the board lacked the authority to rename the institution in the first place. Because the Kennedy Center was named by Congress and established as a memorial through statute, she argues that only Congress can alter its name or commemorative purpose. Allegations of power consolidation and self-commemoration. The lawsuit goes beyond technical arguments about board procedure. Beatty's filing accuses the president and his allies of exploiting institutional control to advance personal legacy building while bypassing democratic safeguards. The complaint characterizes the renaming as an unprecedented act of self-commemoration by a sitting president, one carried out through loyal appointees, rather than open legislative debate. Beatty warns that allowing such actions to stand would erode long-standing norms that prevent public institutions from being used as vehicles for personal glorification. Her legal team argues that the Constitution's system of checks and balances exists precisely to prevent this kind of unilateral action, particularly when it involves national symbols and shared cultural heritage. Trump's reshaping of the Kennedy Center. The renaming dispute cannot be separated from the broader transformation of the Kennedy Center since Trump's return to office. Shortly after being sworn in, Trump removed several existing trustees and appointed himself chair of the board, a move without modern precedent. He subsequently installed Richard Grinnell, a close political ally, as interim executive director. Under the new leadership, the center underwent a series of visible and symbolic changes that supporters describe as revitalization and critics label politicization. Among the most notable shifts was the decision to discontinue the use of multicolored exterior lighting associated with pride celebrations and other events, replacing it with exclusively red, white, and blue illumination. Programming decisions were also scrutinized, with some artists and donors expressing concern about ideological influence. The administration's defense. The Trump administration has dismissed Beatty's lawsuit as politically motivated and legally unsound. White House officials argue that the Kennedy Center's board has broad discretion over branding and governance decisions, including its name.
Administration spokespeople maintain that Trump inherited an institution plagued by deferred maintenance, financial instability, and declining relevance. They credit his leadership with restoring fiscal discipline, modernizing facilities, and broadening the center's appeal. From the administration's perspective, the renaming is not an act of self-promotion, but a recognition of tangible accomplishments. Officials have emphasized that the board vote was bipartisan and voluntary, not imposed by executive order. Legal experts weigh in. Constitutional and administrative law scholars are divided on the merits of Beatty's case. Some argue that the Kennedy Center's congressional charter leaves little room for unilateral renaming, particularly given its designation as a memorial to a specific individual. Others note that the board has historically exercised wide latitude over operations and branding, suggesting courts may be reluctant to intervene absent explicit statutory language prohibiting name changes. A key issue will be whether the court views the addition of Trump's name as a fundamental alteration of the memorial's identity, or merely an honorary modification within the board's authority.
The response from the arts, performers, and cultural organizations has been sharply mixed. Some view the renaming as an unacceptable politicization of a space meant to transcend partisan divisions. Several prominent performers have reportedly reconsidered appearances at the center, citing discomfort with the institution's new identity. Donors, too, have expressed concern about the potential impact on fundraising and international reputation. Supporters of the change argue that cultural institutions should not be immune from political accountability, and that previous leadership allowed ideological programming to alienate large segments of the public. Congressional and political fallout. Beatty's lawsuit may not be the final word. Several lawmakers have indicated they are exploring legislative options to reaffirm the Kennedy Center's name through explicit statutory language, effectively removing ambiguity about congressional intent. The dispute has also reignited broader debates about the role of politics in cultural governance, the independence of federally affiliated institutions, and the limits of executive influence. For Democrats, the case represents a stand against what they describe as creeping authoritarianism. For Republicans, it is framed as resistance to entrenched elites unwilling to accept reform. The broader question of national memory. At its core, the Kennedy Center controversy reflects a larger struggle over how the nation remembers its leaders and defines its symbols. Memorials are not merely physical structures. They are expressions of collective values and historical judgment. Renaming a living memorial while the honoree is still alive, and while serving as president, raises profound ethical and democratic questions. Critics argue it collapses the distinction between public service and personal legacy building, while supporters contend it reflects democratic choice through institutional governance. What the court will decide. The federal court will now consider whether Beatty has standing to sue, whether the board's actions violated federal law, and whether the name change should be reversed or suspended pending further review. Beatty is seeking injunctive relief that would restore the Kennedy Center's original name and remove Trump's branding from signage, publications, and digital platforms. A ruling in her favor could reaffirm congressional authority over national memorials. A ruling against her could significantly expand the autonomy of executive-aligned boards. A test case for institutional independence. The outcome of this case may reverberate far beyond the Kennedy Center. It could establish precedent for how future presidents interact with federally chartered institutions, and how far executive influence can extend without legislative approval. As the legal battle unfolds, the Kennedy Center stands at the intersection of art, law, and politics, its identity contested and its future uncertain. What remains clear is that this fight is about more than a name. It is about power, process, and the enduring tension between democratic governance and individual ambition.